Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Sam Acho Podcast. I have with me, of course, Sam Acho, who is an NFL veteran, an ESPN analyst, a financial professional, and has more credentials than I can honestly count. It's an amazing story, and I can't wait to talk more about that. And we also have Clif Marshall, who has a similarly illustrious career, especially in the sports world as a trainer and sports professional. So what we want to do with this show is talk about the vision Sam has been working on over the last few months, and we'll get into more of those details. So I'm not going to cover that right now, but what I want to talk about is Clif and Sam and your relationship together and why this is going to be such a good show, honestly. Sam, Clif, I'll turn it over to you guys. I would love to hear more about your relationship between you two. And then I want to get some backstory and some dirty details. And then we'll jump into talking more about Sam's, I call it the 3 Gs and 4 Fs. Sam, tell us a little about yourself and your relationship with Clif. Clif, I want to hear from you.
Well, I'll give a little bit about me, and then I want to get to Clif because we have an interesting relationship. So I played about a decade in the NFL, grew up in Dallas, Texas, went to the University of Texas, so have a football background. Also, I'm a family office advisor, so in the financial wealth management space. Also, I've written a couple books, and all that is great. But what I think is also important, too, is what this podcast is going to be about. We always talk about going first, giving space, and growing hope. And for more than anything, I want people to understand that there's a way to win without losing it all. A lot of guys win on the football field or in sports, but they lose when it comes to faith. They lose when it comes to family, and they lose when it comes to finances. And so the whole goal of this podcast is to provide an area, an arena for people, to share their stories, but also to provide a little bit of hope. And so as we were thinking through this podcast of, okay, what do we want it to be and who do we want to spend our time with, Clif and I had some conversations, put it that way. And long story short, Clif, for the last almost 3 decades, 25 years, has been in the sports performance space. So it's been about the last 9 or so years in Indiana basketball, training some of the top basketball players, current NBA pros, but also basketball players. Spent about a decade in the private sector, training, think about the highest paid linebackers, highest paid safeties. I mean, he's trained hundreds of athletes. I think the athletes he's trained have amassed almost $2 billion, right? So there's a long history of people training in football and basketball and baseball. Spent some time at NFL Network as a fitness ambassador. So he has the background, but more than anything, we have the history. Clif and I go back to when I was getting ready to train for the combine. People always ask me, all right, Sam, how do you do this whole NFL combine training process? How'd you make it to the NFL? And that story cannot be told without Clif. So I'm gonna start telling it, and I'm gonna insert Clif. So long story short, coming out of college, went to a national championship my junior year, senior year, didn't play as well, but I had a good year. Our team won this great. And I was trying to figure out where I was going to train. And so anybody who's gone through that process, you meet with different agents. And agents will say, hey, man, you should train at this facility and that facility. Well, I was dead set on training somewhere else because there was a facility where I thought that all the NFL pros were going to be first-round picks. They would go and train. So as I'm meeting with this agent, I'm like, hey, agent, I think you're cool and you're great, but I'm committed to training at facility X. And they're like, hey, Sam, well, that's okay, but you should probably consider somewhere else. I'm like, well, dude, why? They said, well, because, that other facility, it's the trainers have left and all these things. It's like, hey, man, maybe you're just saying that because you didn't buy a spot with that facility. Sometimes these agents, they buy spots or slots at facilities. So I said, no, I'm going to train there. So you can talk to me about whatever else you want to talk about later. They said, Sam, it's not even about buying a spot. I'm just telling you that there's a couple other spots you need to look at. So they handed me a brochure of this place called Ignition. And I'm like, I'm not trying to hear about Ignition. I'm trying to hear about that spot that has all the first round picks. It said, Sam, just take a look. I said, okay, whatever. So I'm flipping through the brochure as I'm meeting with these agents. I turn the brochure to the back, and all of a sudden I see a group of men, NFL pros, or at least getting ready to be pros, holding hands, eyes closed, praying. On the back of their shirt, it says Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. This is on a brochure. This is on the sales material. I'm like, okay, well, these guys are serious about their faith. I open up the inside more. I'm looking, oh, wow, top performer in the 40-yard dash. Oh, wow, they trained Jason Kelsey, trained Devin McCourty, trained David Pollock, trained all these, Connor Barwin, guys who were setting records. I'm like, man, let me find out more. So I leave that agent, that dinner. I pick up my phone. I call the number in that brochure, and it ends up being a man by the name of Clif Marshall. And we talked for over an hour, or about an hour. I think it was actually like 52 minutes, if I remember correctly, maybe 58 minutes and like 19 seconds. I don't know why I remember this, but it was close to an hour. And we talked about faith, talked about family, talked about football, and we also talked about finances, man. If you dominate this W contract. And so I was like, I hung up the phone. I was going to go to Nigeria with my family to do some medical mission work. I said, Clif, I'm training with you. I don't care who the agent is. I'll figure that part out. NFL people, y'all know this. Most times agents will pay for your training because college kids don't have a lot of money. It's like, hey, well, at least they didn't. Now they do. Agents will pay for your training. Then you'll pay them back through the contract. I said, hey, I don't care about an agent. We're going to work together. I'll figure out the agent thing later. Well, fast forward, and Clif will tell the rest of the story, but end up going to train with him, ended up being setting a record for the elk home drill, top performer at the combine, top performer at the Senior Bowl, top performer at my pro day, end up having a 10-year NFL career, but that story can't be told without Clif. And so, Clif, I know that was a long-winded intro, but I'd love to hear more about you, and also you could tell some people about our relationship.
Yes. Wow, Sam. Thank you for that, man. That brought me so much joy hearing you tell the story. And you got to think that was 15 years ago, and we're still here today, as close as we were back then. And I think that is about relationships, and my whole philosophy as a coach is it's relationships first and results second. And when I'm training these athletes, including when I was training Sam, I tell them it's from the time I train them until the grade. And that's been our relationship. And, he also mentioned Proverbs 27:17. That's a life verse for me. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Sam has sharpened me throughout the years, and he continues to sharpen me. I hope that I sharpen Sam, and together, I hope our audience will be sharpened. Just this morning, watching Sam, he's a husband and he's a father, and he's also a Jesus follower. And just this morning, he tells me, Clif, before we start our first podcast, do you care if we pray together? And I mean, wow, that's just so impactful for me. And then he says, Clif, can I call you back here in a moment? My kids are getting ready to leave for school, and I want to pray over them before they head out. And those things right there, that's how Sam has made me a better person. Even though I was his coach, even though he is younger than me, he makes me better each and every day. And I just can't wait to be a part of this podcast and to, again, help sharpen our viewers out there. In addition, I do want to talk about Sam a little bit as a player because, he came out of Texas. He was an All-American, right? He won the Whirlpool Award, the Walter Campbell Award, and both of those awards, one's for community service, the other's for academics, like the academic Heisman. So when I met him and interviewed him and we talked about NFL Combine training, it stood out to me that he is a unique person and obviously a very talented football player. But there were some challenges that he faced even during the NFL draft, even through the NFL Combine process. He certainly broke an all-time record at the NFL Combine, but in our training sessions, he never hit those numbers. It was amazing to me that he went on the biggest stage to the NFL Combine and he performed better than he ever had in training. Typically, it's the other way around. You hit good numbers in training, you go to the NFL Combine, you're on NFL Network, there's thousands of scouts and coaches there watching you, and you just don't have your best workout. Sam dominated in every category. After the Combine, obviously, and after a strong Senior Bowl,
I gotta interrupt, Clif. I gotta interrupt. Okay. You said but why? What do you remember? What you told me? You remember what you told me to do in my? Oh yeah. What did you tell me? Why did that happen?
I do remember the night before he worked out at the NFL Combine. He came to my ring. I stretched him. We walked through the drills together, and then we prayed together. And I believe I gave him a prayer and a Bible verse specifically to pray before he worked out that day. So Sam, can you share what that was?
That's right. That's 100% right. You told me, he said, when you get in your stance, because anyone who goes to the combine, so like you have to get in your stance. You don't just get in, you just run. You have to get in, you have to hold for 2 seconds, right? So get in your stance, be still for 2 seconds, and then boom, you go run your 40-yard dash or run your L cone or your 5-10-5. And he said, Sam, during those 2 seconds while you're in your stance, I want you to pray. I said, huh? Pray? He said, yes. He said, pray Joshua 1:9. I'm like, Joshua 1:9. He said, pray that God would give you the strength and the courage to run your fastest times ever. And mind you, I'm like, Clif had always talked about, hey, in order to run fast, you have to be strong, right? It's not there's dudes who currently in this 2025 NFL draft who I spend a lot of time with, and it's like the people training them, it's like, man, they're not strong enough. That's why they're not running fast. They have to lift more, right? So in order to be fast, you have to be strong. But the courage piece was a little bit new. I'm like, which means pray for courage. Said it takes courage to perform at the highest level. So Sam, before you get in your while you're in your stance, pray that God will give you the strength and courage for your fastest times ever. And so I did. And like I said, Clif, I wasn't even close to those times. Like it was a mirror. It was an answer prayer, a miracle, whatever you want to call it, miracle answer prayer. But I'll never forget that.
Yes. And the record still stands today for the L cone drill. And again, he was a top performer in all these categories. Fast forward to the NFL draft. I mean, when you dominate the combine like that and you dominate the Senior Bowl, you just got to know that you're going to be like a top 50 pick, you know, especially after his strong career at Texas, especially after his interviews at the combine. I'll never forget, after his interviews at the combine, the media says, this guy, Sam Acho, will be the next president of the United States. That's how well he spoke.
I love that.
We don't talk politics on this show, but maybe, Sam, I'm still thinking there could be an opportunity for you to be president, man, because he's such a good public speaker. And then I fly out to Dallas to be with Sam during the NFL draft. And I was at his parents' house. I was in the living room. And the first round goes, and he's not chosen. The second round's going, and it gets to the end of the second round. And I know for sure, based on some of the conversations he had and his agent had, that he would be taken in the second round. He wasn't chosen. So the draft went to the following day. And finally, long story short, he's chosen by the Arizona Cardinals and obviously becomes a starter out there. But again, there was adversity as part of that. And I remember Sam being distraught and very frustrated and maybe even questioning what's going on. And so that's part of the adversity that we're going to talk about on this show, right? And how our hope can be found in other people's adversity and how we can help them through maybe a trial that they're going through in life.
What I love about those stories so much is that it is at the intersection of all of these things. So the 4 F's that you've talked about a lot, Sam. So faith, family, football, finances, all of those things are very intertwined. You know, it's like some people say, like, it's not business, it's not personal, it's just business, you know, or whatever. But like in sports, it's like, you know, it's not personal, it's just sports, or it's just football or something like that. And it's like, no, all these things are deeply intertwined. Like thinking about that in the 2-second pause in the stance and like having to pray. And so what I'm excited about with the show and what I want to hear from more of your vision here, Sam, something that we've been talking about for the last several months, is when we have these 4 F's, we have faith, we have family, we have football, and we have finances, and how intertwined those are. Those are not always easy to juggle. Which one do you prioritize? How do you take care of your family? You know, your wife, your kids, your spouse. How do you take care of your finances? Because finances are deeply intermingled with your career, your athlete, whether you're in the gym, stay healthy. All of these things are all together. And then, of course, how do you lean on your faith in those times? And so there's a way that we want to kind of cultivate that kind of conversation. Can get very heavy. But there's also a lot of joy and light and hope as well. But in these darker times, there's a way to cultivate these conversations where you go first, where Sam and Clif, you guys as leaders, exemplars in this world, you can go first and share your story to help others feel like they're comfortable enough to share their story, that it's okay, that you're seen, you're known, and that's okay. And then we give space for other athletes to be able to share their stories in this kind of like safe environment. And then there's that grow hope. And so, Sam, what I want to hear from you, and Clif, would love to, your perspective as well, is how do you see you having done that in your career over the years? Because you have had some difficult times. Like, how do you work through those things? And then why is that? Why do all these components matter to you so much? And how do you want to encourage athletes listening to this show going forward with those the four F's? So tell me a little bit about your story, backstory, going through some of these challenges, and then why it's so important to you, and where we can go from here.
One of the biggest challenges being a professional athlete is that oftentimes your identity can get stuck in what you do, not who you are. You see people on TV and you're thinking, oh man, this guy's making all this money and they're, playing in the NBA or NFL or MLB, and you forget that they're human and they go through stuff. They lose loved ones. They go through divorce, and they go through getting released or getting injured and some of these things. And so I think for me, one thing I realized is I didn't know, Clif could attest to this. I thought I was going to get drafted a lot higher than I did. There was a point, he was at my house where first round comes and goes, second and third round, that's day 2, right? Day 1 is round 1. Day 2 is round 2 and 3. I was guaranteed by my agent, by other scouts, coaches. One of the coaches who was training me, happened to be training me, was like, was like a free agent coach, if you will. He was training some outside linebackers. He was like, man, I'm watching you, Sam. I didn't know you before, but you'd be a steal for a first round pick. And I'm like, bro, hope you get a job so you can come inside me. Well, 2 weeks later, he gets a job for the Raiders, DC, defensive coordinator. The Raiders flew me out a couple weeks before the draft. And I'm like, man, this is going to be my opportunity. They told me they'd draft me and nothing, right? And so I'm sitting here like, okay, all these other teams, nothing. There was a point that night where I was like, there was tears that were shed. I cried because it felt as if everyone had lied to me, and this dream that I had been holding was now slipping away. And so, it's cool to say, I played 9 years in the NFL, and I'm doing this, and I'm on ESPN now. But the hard part is getting your identity stuck into some of those things. So the reason why I even started this podcast, was to give people space to be able to share some of their story, to grow hope, to say, hey man, here's where I was, here's where it went, but here's where I'm at now, maybe here's where I'm going. But also, in order to do that, you have to go first. Even like building some of the brand, right? Launching a website and working through even some of the branding stuff we're doing. It's like, I want to show guys you are more than just what you do, and that you can win at more than just football, right? You can win when it comes to in the financial world. You don't have to just believe everything that this financial advisor says when all of a sudden it's like, man, there's like 7 other things that I've heard about. How come we're not doing those? Or even when it comes to your faith. Oh man, look, I won in football, but like, I have no faith in God. I have no faith in anything, right? I don't know who Jesus is. I don't know the hope that God for. There's a verse in Zechariah 3:4. It says, talks about, like God says, I'll remove your filthy garments from you and give you rich robes. Like there's a hope, there's a real hope that's available. I want people to know that. Right? Even with family, man, some people are like, man, I got my faith figured out, right? I got football figured out, but like, they don't know their kids. They don't know their marriage on the brink. I want people to win. And so this podcast will be a space for that, to be able to hear people's stories, to talk about the highs and the lows. And if I could really, so that's a little bit about why I do it. And Clif, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Right? You spent almost a decade in Indiana. And as you know, in coaching, oftentimes in sports and football, basketball, whatever, when a coach leaves, all of a sudden your job could be in jeopardy. And just recently, you just went through a coaching change. Head coach is gone, and all of a sudden your job is in jeopardy. How do you process this idea of going first, giving space, and growing hope?
Well, Sam, I think adversity reveals the character of a man. And I think that what's unique about my situation right now, to your point, I've been a coach for 25 years. Been blessed to do it at the highest level with the highest athletes. But yeah, we had a coaching change this year at Indiana. Our head coach, Mike Woodson, retired. And obviously when that happens, a new coaching regime comes in. And when a new coach is hired, most oftentimes they bring their strength coach who's been with them at previous stops. So I'm kind of going through that right now. I'm navigating that right now. And without my faith, I don't know how I make it through, right? Without my faith, fear and worry and anxiety sets in. And that's where I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to provide for my kids, right? And then that gets into the finances. Well, thankfully, over the course of 25 years, I was smart with my money, right? I invested my money. So now I'm not scrambling to find my next job. And with that being said, Sam, I think our personal experiences that we go through in life happen so we can help someone else going through the same experience. And in my life, I have battled addiction. By the grace of God, I'm 16 years sober today, but I can't connect with the alcoholic, right? With the drug addict. I have battled through, obviously, on the brink of divorce with my high school sweetheart, right? We've dealt with infidelity. We've dealt with adultery. We've dealt with, how do you manage a marriage that is on the rocks, right? Do you give up or do you fight? And do you lean into your faith? You know, the world will tell us to follow our hearts. The Bible will tell you to lead your heart. And that's pretty deep, because if I followed my heart, I would fall back into, if I followed my heart, I would have fallen into separating from my wife and probably divorcing. And had I done that, I would not have the two beautiful kids I have today, the beautiful life and the beautiful ministry that my wife and I are living out currently in Indiana. My wife leads multiple athletes at Indiana University on the women's side in a faith-based Bible study, character building sessions each week in our home. And it's all because our test has become our testimony. And I'm currently going through a test right now with what God's going to do with my career and my future as I leave Indiana University.
I appreciate both of you going first, because sharing some of these hard moments, I mean, this is real life. You know, this is what I love about the show. And Sam, what you and Clif are doing is, this is real. This is life. And it doesn't always get the kind of coverage, or you don't really see this on TV. You don't really see this in, you know, folks' biographies or whatever, but this is real. And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys obviously know more than I do about this, but the sports world seems it's very high pressure, very performance based. And if you don't perform, if you don't do X and Y in one season, you're gone, as if you don't even matter. And so you've got to hit your quotas, you got to hit whatever, but it's almost like you're not even a person. And what I love about your stories is we are people. Despite these job changes, despite not hitting, you know, where I thought I was going to be in the draft, or where I thought I was going to be in this season, or whatever that might be, you guys have families. You guys have, you know, temptations. You guys have character flaws, as we all do, you know, me too. And I get so fearful about money, and I get so fearful about my faith and how I'm treating my family and things like that. And so I love that there is this space that you guys get to cultivate. So I'm curious, from y'all, what are some things that you have learned that you'd like to unpack during this show each week? We'll have guests, we'll have, you know, folks on and talking through a lot of different kind of stories. But what would you say in your mind? I think Clif, you guys have talked about maybe like a Clif Notes, you know, like at the end of every episode, we're going to have Clif Notes. But I'm curious, like from both of you, what are your Clif Notes where, you know, some takeaways, things that you have learned to either prioritize, or just ways that you structured your life, maybe a rule of life, or, you know, like, hey, for me and what I've learned, it's this. I know that I've got to do this to take care of myself, my family, my relationship with God. What does that look like for you guys, and what would you, like to unpack or would share with folks that some takeaways that you've learned over the years in your careers?
I think for me, actually, no, I want Clif to go first. Clif Notes. I want to hear the Clif Notes.
That's right.
Well, I think as we've talked here, you know, it's obviously you have to have a firm foundation, right? And for me, I have to remind myself of that often. That's why I was up this morning at 5:30 a.m., getting into the Word, praying and meditating, because the firm foundation for us is rooted in Christ. The one thing that I've learned, I have been so blessed over 25 years to walk with nearly 400 professional athletes. right? And these are athletes from the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA. And I have been with them on the mountaintop when there's been great success, like Sam, for example, breaking all-time NFL combine records. But I've also been with them in the valley, right? And Sam's talking about the identity of a pro athlete, and putting all your identity into your sport, or as coaches as well. And I think in the valley, that's where we grow the most, and that's where we learn the most about ourselves. So dealing with these players who are battling addiction, battling anxiety, battling mental health, battling divorce, battling bankruptcy. So many of the pro athletes that I trained at the highest level have lost a lot of money, right? And I think that transition into real life is tough. And I think part of this podcast is for those, not just athletes, but CEOs, husbands who may be struggling, fathers who may be struggling, people who are going through real life issues. My goal is that this show will give them hope, and it'll give them a chance to potentially take a couple Clif notes with them that will bring them encouragement.
If I can give my Clif Notes version is, it's hard to do things alone. It's not even hard. It's foolish to try to do things alone. I get it. There's a season where you got to grind on your own. I get it. You weren't with me shooting in the gym. Like, I understand that mentality. But if you want to grow anything, you need a team. Like, and not just any team, a team of people not only who you can trust. Yeah, trust is important. They need to be skilled, knowledgeable. Right? I think about Clif. When I was thinking about going to the NFL, it wasn't like, okay, guys, I'm just gonna show up at the YMCA and just kind of work out and just kind of show up at the combine. No, I needed a people with a manual. Like, this is the manual. This is the program. Right? Clif had actually, he's like, here. We did it last year with Jason Kelsey. We did it with Connor Barwin, did it with David Pollack, did it with Devin McCourty. Like, we'll go down and down and down and down the list. This is the plan. Follow the plan. But also, if you think about it, we're not perfect. So sometimes you may deviate from that plan. Okay, do you have somebody who can pick you up? Right? That's what I hope this podcast can be, a place for a pickup, a place for a reminder that you are not alone. So it's like when you're going through some hard times, some hardships, some struggle, no, you're not alone. It's okay. Like, it's so easy to be hard on yourself. Man, I missed this appointment. I didn't hit this target. I didn't do this. It's like, dude, it's okay. That's in the past. Let's focus on the present. We talk so much about, Brandon, about giving space. Like, I know what it's like. We know what it's like to be pressured and to feel pressured, to feel like all these people need all these things from me. This podcast is not that. We're not asking anything from you. We are giving you space to be able to process, to be able to think, to be able to pray. Right? We are going first and saying, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable first, share about some of the struggles, some of the doubts, some of the fears, some of the tears, some of the anxiety. Right? But hopefully in that we can grow some hope. And so the Clif Notes version for me is that I want this to be a space for you to know that there is something on the other side of your fear, your anxiety, other side of your doubts, that there's a real hope. And you can go from a child, if you will, to like what it means to be a father. From a spender, oh man, I used to spend my money and I was broke. Okay, here's what it looks like to be an investor. That's what I want us to be talking about on this podcast, right? What it looks like to be, a former player. I'm a former coach at XYZ. No, I'm not a former, I'm a legend. Like, Clif, you're a walking legend. You coach 400 athletes. Guys who still got a relationship to this day, 25 years in the industry, 10 years in the private sector, founder of a company that's still doing well, that is existing outside of you, 10 years in the NFL space, more than that actually, right? NBA players, college, you're changing people's lives. So you're a legend. You're not a former Indiana, former NFL player. No, I'm currently an ESPN broadcaster by the grace of God. Currently a family office advisor at AWM Capital. Currently helping athletes learn how to win without losing at all. You're not a former anything. So I think that it's a good time to remember that we can't do it alone. And so that's a long Clif Notes version. That's why I don't call it the Sam Notes. Sam Notes will go long. Clif Notes is good.
And we're going to have a little fun on this show. That's what I'm excited about too. We talked a lot about, there's a lot of dark, challenging things, but we're also going to have some fun. Life's about fun too. So we're going to have a lot of light and joy as well. So we're going to have guests on this show. We're going to be talking about different stories and talking especially, of course, about faith, family, football, and finances, and how all those can come together in stories where we go first, give space, and grow hope. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on this very first episode. I'm excited for much more coming out weekly. So you can catch us at samacho.com, and you can get in touch with Sam there, see all the socials, and find show notes and blogs and articles and resources, and find out where Sam's speaking and all that kind of thing. Go to samacho.com. You'll see all the resources there. So, gents, thank you, and we'll see you next week.